Hello my beautiful friends, and welcome back to our channel and today's video where we're continuing our series on antidotes to perfectionism. So this is an extension, a part of the perfectionism deprogramming series. And if you've watched that series, at the start of the series, for the first few videos, I talk about what perfection is and isn't, and how you might know that you have perfectionism or not, how it's showing up in your life. And we talk a lot about how it's creating results for you might not realize that you don't like, that you don't want, that are causing unnecessary suffering and self-sabotage for you. So we've established that perfectionism is not a virtue, but instead something that's getting in your way, something that is hurting you. And so now, knowing that perfectionism is a collection of archetypal thought errors, cognitive distortions, that's how we have defined perfectionism in this series. We now know that we can make changes and make improvements in our lives by looking at our thoughts. And this is supported as well, this is better understood when you use the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is something that I use a lot in coaching to help show my clients what they're creating. Because cognitive behavioral therapy shows you that your thoughts influence your emotions, which then influence your behaviors. As a perfectionist, you've got goals and expectations for yourself. You've got behaviors that you want to change because they produce your outcome. So instead of just saying, snap out of it, do better, do differently, behave differently, we can use thought management to change our thoughts, which change our emotions, which then naturally, easily change our behaviors. They make those behaviors flow. Instead of just trying to change, just trying to do better, working against our emotions and our thoughts, which is a waste, a misuse of our energy. We should be using our energy for us. So with all that being said, we are noticing the thoughts that are conducive with perfectionism and causing these emotions and behaviors, these consequences that we don't like. And it is amazing work when you can release and remove some of those thoughts and emotions and behavior combinations. But we need to fill it, that space that we've left, with something else to propel us forwards. Because usually when we have these perfectionistic thoughts, it is our brain doing its best job to alert us to something that we want to change, an emotion that we don't like, and often a behavior that we don't like. So what we're doing with this perfectionism antidote series is I want to provide you a smorgasbord of different perspectives that can feed the thoughts that still create the emotions and behaviors that you like, without all the getting in your way, without all the self-criticism and self-doubt, those non-useful feelings and behaviors that come with the perfectionistic thoughts. So if you need a bit more time for these concepts to sink in and really grasp them, go and check out the first couple of videos in the Perfectionism Deprogramming series. And right now we're going to jump into our antidote today, which is compassion and curiosity as opposed to judgment. Let's go. So this antidote has been highly relevant and evident to me over the last couple of weeks as we've just completed our perfectionism deprogramming protocol journaling challenge. Now, if you missed out on that, we delivered this through Instagram. If you go over to my bio, Dr. Beck, Dr. spelled out, _Beck with 2 C's. From my bio, you can click a link and you can download the workbook, which is the Perfectionism Deprogramming Protocol. It is a 14-day cycle where we take a perfectionistic thought, we deconstruct it and rebuild it as something more useful, and we spend time reinforcing, implementing that in our lives to make a change. Not only is the workbook over there, but if you go onto my profile into the video section, you can find a bunch of videos from when I went live with you guys and actually did the journaling work with you, as well as walk you through the exercise and answer the questions that you had. So if you missed out, go and check it out. It's an amazing resource. I got so many great questions and feedback from that challenge. So thank you so much if you joined in. I'm so glad you spent that time on yourself. So there were many things in that journaling challenge that really catered to the perfectionistic mindset that I put in specifically, knowing that people were coming into this with perfectionistic thinking. And one of the most important features that I used and offered up with guidance in that workbook and in this challenge was the emotional component. That emotional component is so important when you're journaling to combat or give you a direction for when the judgment comes up, which it will. Humans love to judge. It's what we do. We've got these big brains that don't just live well in the present moment. We're always looking forwards, making plans, and thinking about our expectations relative to our reality. We don't just look at our reality and say, right now in this moment, am I happy, safe, and well? Is everything wonderful? Yes or no? No, we look at our reality relative to what we expect, both in this present moment and projecting into the future. Where are we now compared to where we want to be in the future? This is an amazing feature of our human brains, that we can do this, that we can project and plan. But what happens with perfectionistic people is that we can quickly use this against ourselves. You've got this reality to expectation ratio. For an ambitious person, you have goals and big expectations, right? So this side, this expectation piece, is often a lot bigger, higher than the reality. Again, both in the moment and in the big picture and looking forwards to the future. So this equation is out of balance. We have reality less than expectations. Now, this equation being out of balance is just data. This is not a problem until your judgment comes along and says it's a problem. And this, I think, is one of the major hallmarks of perfectionism. As humans, we can't just leave data to be data. We make a judgment for our survival and growth and connection purposes, right? We want to know what this means for us and therefore what we can do next or what we should do differently. One of the hallmarks of a perfectionist, though, is that when they see that their reality is less than their expectation, they will be fast and harsh in their judgment, in what they make that out of balance equation mean. A perfectionist interpretation will be full of cognitive distortions. They will look at their reality being less than their expectations, and some of their judgments will include labeling. This is a problem, this is not good enough, I'm not good enough. Something's wrong. And fortune telling, another cognitive distortion. From that equation being out of balance, they'll start to predict the future. What does this mean for my future? My reality is less than my expectations. If I can't do it now, I'll never be able to do it. If I haven't been able to work it out so far, I'm not going to be able to work it out in the future. I failed so far, I'm going to fail in the end. Maybe I'm not cut out for this, maybe I can't do this. Or whatever variation of those thoughts come up in your perfectionistic thinking. Now, we can spend a lot of time talking about those cognitive distortions, those thought errors, whether these judgments, these interpretations are true or not. But that's not where I want to go today with you. Today, I want to hang out more on the side of not is it true, but is it useful? Because when it comes to metacognition, thinking about your thinking, self-coaching, journaling, introspection, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to looking at what your brain is doing to create these feelings and behaviors and outcomes in your life, fast and harsh judgment usually closes you down. Instead of giving you the opportunity to extract the information from these thoughts that your brain is offering. The perfectionist's response to their reality being less than their expectations is not a useful response. It creates more obstacles, more barriers, more suffering that's unnecessary, and more self-sabotage relative to the goal, to where you want to go, instead of serving the perfectionist. For example, if I'm going about my day and I'm in the hospital doing an admitting shift and I'm working away, the list is starting to build up of admissions, and I have the thought, my brain fires the thought to me, my admissions aren't efficient. This has come from me analyzing my reality versus my expectations. The data that I might be looking at here is, say, I have done 3 admissions in my shift so far. I have 3 admissions waiting in line. My expectation might have been that I never have more than 1 admission waiting. These are the bits of information that I pulled out of my situation. I'm not necessarily saying that this reasoning is good and true, because for example, I do know when I sit and think about it, I can't control the rate at which admissions come in. Those 3 admission requests might all come at once. And so in the snap of a fingers, suddenly I have 3. And therefore I'm saying if I'm only doing good enough, if I only ever have 1 admission waiting, then I would have had to complete those 2 admissions in, well, 0 seconds. What I want to show you here is when I'm in this better state of mind and I can look at the data like that and say, is this fair, is this reasonable, is this true, is this not, is this a problem? My perfectionistic mind instead, with this habitual perfectionistic thinking, will quickly offer a judgment about this reality being less than expectations equation and say something is wrong. And blah, 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 all the thoughts, the labeling, the future predicting, you're not doing good enough, you're not good enough, you need to do better now, you should be doing better now, why aren't you doing better, you'll never work this out, your admissions will never be efficient, you'll never do a good job on this shift. So whatever this judgmental response is specifically, the idea is that it is a negative judgment, a judgment that produces a feeling and emotion in me that I would then say is not useful or negative in terms of my behavior. So what makes the thought or the judgment negative is not the thought in itself, not the perspective or the belief in itself, but what emotion it creates in you and what that emotion drives in terms of your behavior. Those consequences, the emotion and the behavior, are what will reveal to you whether that thought is good or bad, useful or not useful, the consequences of the thought. So here, I see this perfectionistic thought response with judgment as being a problem because it creates feelings in me like defeated, hopeless, shame, frustrated, pressure, stress, and those emotions then drive behaviors that aren't useful for my goal, which is to be more efficient, to juggle my workload, to prioritize things well, and also truly to just enjoy my time on the shift. So those feelings aren't conducive with creating the behaviors that I want and therefore the outcomes that I want. That's it. We decide on the thoughts that we want based on the emotions and behaviors they create for us. Simple, but not easy to work out and execute on. And as humans, we don't leave situations to just be data, we interpret them. So we have our reality versus our expectations, and when our reality is less than our expectations, we make a judgment. If that judgment is perfectionistic, we're probably not producing emotions and behaviors that serve us in our goal. Right. So what is our goal? What do we want from this? Because what I don't want, and why I want us to use compassion and curiosity in this moment instead of judgment, is because what I don't want is for you to be dismissive about these threats that your mind is bringing to your attention. When my perfectionistic thinking makes the judgment, my admissions aren't efficient, while we have established that it's not useful and I don't want to act from that, behave from that, because it's not producing results that I like, we can't just dismiss this concern. My mind has brought up a threat that it wants me to pay attention to. I know it's a threat, or I'm getting the hint that it's something that's important because it's producing this feeling in me that's quite compelling. Your emotions are your mind's way of getting your attention. So I want to know what my mind is trying to alert me to when it brings up this thought, my admissions are not efficient. And what you can do, instead of reacting in a perfectionistic way with labeling and predicting the future, fortune telling with these thought errors, is when you get that alert, please look at this. You can actually look at the data. You can use this uncomfortable emotion as your cue to look to see if there actually is a threat. Instead of when you believe that perfectionistic interpretation, my admissions aren't efficient, and then you feel those emotions and you go and act from those negative, non-useful emotions. Instead, you feel the emotion, you notice the emotion, and you're like, hey, I know this emotion comes from a thought. I'm gonna go look at the thoughts that are producing this emotion, and I'm gonna decide with my higher mind, with my intellect, whether there is a threat or not. So in general, in our modern day lives, there are actually very few threats that we want to fight or flight from. where we do want to just act quickly and get out of there or fight for our lives. But instead, for most of these threats, they're usually threats to less terrifying things like perhaps our career progression. So in this case, my mind is probably saying, I'd like you to look at this data, reconsider if you like the behaviors that you're executing on here, because I want you to do well in your career progression here. I want you to perform well today because it's going to add up to how you behave as a physician. That is the threat. This idea that maybe I'm not doing my best and I could do better. That maybe I'm not acting to my potential, that I could do better. So my beautiful friends, here is where the antidote of compassion and curiosity comes in. We use compassion and curiosity here instead of the judgment. The perfectionistic judgment, the quick labeling, the quick predicting, fortune telling, those thought errors that come up habitually. This temptation for us as perfectionists to draw a verdict about the situation where our expectations are less than our reality, whether it's in our day-to-day lives or whether it's thinking about this is where I am now and this is my goal, I'm not at my goal yet. So you'll see from what we've just talked about that the reason that we want to purposefully use curiosity and compassion is not because, or not just because it feels good and it's nice, but actually because it's useful. It pulls us out of that fear and threat mode where we just want to act from those compelling emotions. And instead, interrupting with curiosity and compassion puts us in the mode to look at the data, to look and see, hey, is there actually a threat here? If when we feel fear or any discomfort, we use that as a cue to get curious in a compassionate way, we get the opportunity to look at the data for what it is, instead of just believing this perfectionistic interpretation that is often fraught with thought errors, cognitive distortions. When we are in fear and shame and hopelessness and defeatedness and frustration, we're not problem solving well. We're not looking objectively at data. We're highly biased. We are in fight, flight, freeze, appease. That's so useful if there's a genuine threat in our environment that we want to do something about immediately. It's not so useful if we're in a more nuanced environment where we want to carefully plan our behaviors given our long-term big picture goals. When you notice those feelings coming up in your body and you swap yourself to curiosity and compassion, you can then look at the data in a way that helps you find the actual problem. And then, only then, once you see the actual problem, what your mind is actually alerting to you and what your mind actually wants from you, can you then decide on the actual solution to the problem. So, for example, if the problem is that you don't like your behavior, so we're looking at this reality and expectations, we're saying, I've got a problem with the reality here, I don't like how I'm behaving here. I want to do something differently. Now that sounds really simple, but once you've got that, now you can ask for more detail from your mind, right? Like, what exactly do I not like about my behavior? What would I like to do differently here? What are my options? What am I ultimately trying to achieve? And therefore, what would I like to change right now? Other problems that your mind might be alerting you to is not only to change right in that present moment, but also perhaps the situation has been gone and you're reflecting on this. You might be saying, I don't want to repeat this behavior in the future. Or one of your problems might be, I don't know why I did this behavior and I feel like I don't trust myself. I don't understand where it came from. It felt impulsive. I just reacted. I'm worried about repeating this behavior again in the future. I'm worried that I don't have control in my life. I'm worried that I don't trust myself. On the other hand, the problem might be in your expectations. Perhaps you want to change your expectations. Perhaps when you actually sit and look at your expectations and you decide whether you like them or not, there might be something there that you want to change. So once you're looking with curiosity and compassion at the actual data set about what the actual problem is, suddenly you can extract so much more information. Imagine trying to look at the situation from a place of shame and frustration. Imagine what the quality of your answers would be and how far you'd be able to push that questioning when you're in that shut down or fearful place. It is going to be nowhere near as high quality as if you're asking those questions with compassion. And even when I'm coaching with my clients, I see their judgments start to inhibit them, even when I'm here in the conversation with them, holding this safe, neutral space. It is so habitual for us as humans. Your judgment will stop you early on in the piece before you get to the heart of the problem, before you can extract the information about the actual problem. Now, once you've got the actual problem, the solution usually becomes quite clear. You get a higher quality solution if you approach and ask questions about the actual problem with compassion and curiosity. Open and interested, looking for opportunities. The solution, when approached with compassion and curiosity, will be higher quality as well. Part of the solution will probably need to involve accepting reality as it is now. That's what that higher, more intelligent part of yourself would say. This has happened. I am choosing to accept it, not only because it's fact, it's out of my control, but also if I don't accept it, I can see that it's creating all this frustration and resentment and shame and guilt and so on for me. And that's now influencing my present, even though it's in the past. When you're approaching the solution with compassion and curiosity and thinking about what you can possibly do to course correct with these problems or make new solutions from these problems, when you're not judging yourself about what you're capable of or not capable of, or what you've done before or not, or what's possible for you in the future, when you're not in that judgmental mode, but you're in this space of curiosity and compassion, openness, belief in your abilities, there are more opportunities available to you as you make up solutions. When you're judging yourself in that perfectionistic way and saying that you're not good enough and you'll never be good enough, labeling and fortune telling, you're not going to see all of the solutions that you truly are able to execute on. And this is tough. This takes a lot of skillfulness to be able to be in compassion and curiosity when you ask these questions. Because remember, you're probably starting from an emotionally negative place, from a judgmental and critical place, where your brain just wants to say, why did I do that? I can't believe I did that. I always do this. And you have to keep bringing yourself back to, I wonder why I did this. I wonder how I came to this. I wonder why my brain offered this. I wonder why I thought this was my best course of action at the time. Or I wonder why I think I didn't have any options. I wonder what I was trying to get out of this. That is how compassion and curiosity can totally change your understanding of the problem and therefore your options, what you would choose for a solution, versus approaching it in a perfectionistic way, where your solution might be as simple as, I don't like what I did, just do better. If you don't extract any more information from the problem, you don't get any insight into how that problem came to be, and you don't really find a solution that will actually drive different results for you in the future. Instead, if you say, I'll just do it differently, you're relying on changing your behavior in this thought, emotion, behavior loop. But you can't do things differently, not reliably, and not in a sustained way, without first changing the way that you're thinking, your thoughts. When you think differently, when you take on different perspectives, you naturally have different emotions that drive different behaviors. And that is what I want for you, to start working with yourself, with your perspectives, with your emotions, with your behaviors, instead of pushing back against everything in this dismissive, perfectionistic way. All right, my beautiful friends, I hope you got so much out of this video today. Let me know any questions that you've got down below, and I'll see you guys in my next one.